Hey folks, David Stewart here. Hope you guys are having a fantastic day. Why don't conservatives get culture? Why don't they understand art? Why are they always losing the culture war? I have some hypotheses that I'd like to go over, and I think a lot of these you will agree with now, and if not, I think they will become increasingly clear over the next year as conservative pundits start to display the deficiencies that I'm talking about as they start to interact more with culture, especially games, if you've been paying attention to some controversies in the gaming industry lately. So the first big reason why conservatives don't get art and culture is conservatism as a political ideology is inherently passive. It's in the name. We're conserving. We're staying where we are. We're not changing into something else. We're not for a particular thing. We're against change. So it's always passive. And that means the conservative stance is also always in flux because of the way that this works. The problem with conservatism, and one of the reasons I don't call myself a conservative, is that they've conserved nothing. They couldn't even conserve the women's bathroom. So it's an old joke, like if you want to know the conservative stance, you just look at the liberal stance from 20 years ago. If you want to know what a Republican thinks is the correct way of thinking, just it's whatever Democrats thought 20 years ago. And that's pretty much right, because as things march and progress, then the conservative is always just on the other side of that, trying to hold back, trying to put the brakes on cultural change, if you will. They're not for anything. And so as a result, they just don't interact with culture very well at all. They don't think about actively influencing culture. They don't think about actively making art. They don't think about actively pushing things towards a goal, towards a vision. There's no goal, there's no vision. The only goal and vision of the conservative movement is whatever is right now, which happens to be whatever the Democrat stance was 20 years ago, right? So that's the big reason. Number two, and this one is huge because it's not just about the passivity of it, it's about money, is that when it comes to conservative businessmen, but especially conservative media types, they are all about the money. They are not about the art, they're about the money. And there's a huge difference. And it makes a big difference when you are trying to change culture, whether you are focusing on trying to do something great or you're just wanting an ROI. Everything's about the bottom line. It's like, well, how can I make money on this endeavor? Not how can I change hearts and minds? A true artist, and I consider myself one, cares about the artistic product. They care about what is coming out. They care about the existence of their book, the existence of their music, the existence of their art, their movie, their comic, their game, whatever it is. They care about it existing. It's something that is an expression of their humanity, their self, their soul. It's not just a way to make money. And this was kind of my big complaint about the book industry, is that everybody is trying to like make a buck as quickly and easily as possible. That's why all the indie writers jumped on the AI train. They're like, how can I avoid writing my books and still make money as an author? It's like, why don't you just do anything else with your life? All right, so the conservatives tend to be really obsessed with the ROI. And that actually leads me to number three, which is that conservative media is entirely focused on marketing and monetization of an audience, right? So they are focused on market segments that they identify, saying things that get those market segments excited, and then monetizing them as heavily as possible, selling them a product, selling them a bad children's book, or doing a movie or doing a piece of media that's intensely focused on one of those market segments to give them something that they especially want. It's the equivalent of what we do in the book business of like selling teenage vampire romance novels to 13-year-olds, right? The difference between a real substantial piece of art and one of these marketed pieces of art, like making something to market, it's the difference between The Passion of the Christ and a Pure Flix film. And if you've ever seen these, it's not like they're terrible, but you get the idea that they're making it for a certain segment. The budget is low. It's designed to sell a certain amount and make a certain amount of money back for the creator. It's not really designed to be something big and huge and meaningful, something that's going to change hearts, it's going to change minds, it's going to change the world. Whereas The Passion of the Christ, you can feel the passion of the movie makers when it comes to creating what The Passion of the Christ was, right? Mel Gibson and all of his crew, in some cases suffering consequences, maybe getting blacklisted for making the movie of The Passion of the Christ. That's a big difference between like, that's, people are like, where are the conservative artists? That's the big problem with conservative pundits, is they don't see something like The Passion of the Christ and say like, how can I give money to make more of these? What they instead think is like, well, what's a market segment that I could exploit, and how can I maximize the amount of money that I get from them, right? Like, this is always been, where are the conservative artists? It's like, you just never talk about them. You don't have me, quote, I'm conservative, right? You don't have me on your show. You don't have any of the conservatives I bring on my show on your show. You don't ever promote their books, even when their books are totally in your wheelhouse, totally intersecting what you're doing. You don't do any of that, right? You couldn't care less, because that's not going to make you money, right? Ben Shapiro is not going to have me on because promoting my book doesn't make him money, unless I give him a kickback or something. He'd rather sell a bad children's book. Matt Walsh would rather sell a bad children's book that's just a silly parody that does nothing for anyone and is garbage, rather than do something substantial that will actually affect the culture and take a risk, take a financial risk. They're just not willing to do it. Whereas the other side, you know, there's people in Hollywood that care about money for sure, but most of them really are artists and people that really want to change the culture. This was my whole thing with like the Sweet Baby Inc. stuff. Like, these were people from Gamergate 1 who did all this stuff for free. They would continue destroying your games for free, even if you took away the business. The parasitic business is just an opportunity to exploit their network, their patronage network, to get money towards them. It's really like a shakedown. That actually brings me to number 4 on the list, which is that conservatives don't build patronage networks. They don't build networks of people who are wealthy and successful funding artists for the sake of the art, which is what we had the model for all art prior to the 20th century. They're stuck in the corporate mindset, the corporate model of making art, which is where you identify a market segment, you get a creator to make something specifically for that market segment. You try to sell as many copies as possible to that market segment to generate a profit. That's the corporate model. It worked, you know, all the way back in the pulps. It worked for books, worked for music, works for all this stuff. But that's not making high art. Whereas like in the 18th century, you had, you know, rich lords and princes who would hire composers like Franz Joseph Haydn to just make music for the sake of making music. Kings would commission composers to make things for their own amusement, or composers would make things for the glory of God, funded by the church in lots of cases, right? So this stuff, these patronage networks, conservatives are just unwilling to really make them. I mean, I deal with them on a small level with like you, my viewers, and other authors that I deal with. We have our own little patronage network, but it's not really attached to anybody that has had significant economic success that really cares about art. They'll be like, oh, you're going to make a book? I'll fund, or maybe I'll fund your game. How much money are we going to make? No. Yeah, they don't build those networks in the same way, at least when it comes to art. They're good at building little political patronage networks for, you know, political things, but when it comes to changing the culture, they're just unwilling and unable to do it. So they don't build those patronage networks. So those are the main reasons. If you're going to come down into 2 areas, is that they're basically passive when it comes to culture. They don't interact with culture. And number 2, they're overly obsessed with all the things that have to do with the economics of it, rather than changing hearts and minds. And the last one, and this one's really huge, and it kind of comes back to that first one, they're passive. They're just unable or unwilling to interact with new and emerging forms of media. This is why, rather than getting on like the Sweet Baby Inc. thing that I talked about when it was breaking, right? Like talking about that and saying, well, maybe we should make a game. They will talk about it and just say games are bad and you're bad if you play games and you should never have any fun. You should pull yourself up by your bootstraps, work 3 jobs for the benefit of who exactly? For the US government to take more of the money, right? They just are completely unresponsive to like games as art or comics. Oh, comics are what those little teenagers bought in like the 1980s. Why would anyone want to buy a comic? Why would I care about comics? Well, lots of people like comics. Comics are something that translates into the movie sphere, so it has an effect on culture. Books have an effect on culture. Not as much, I think, as games these days. I write a lot of books, you know. I try to make art. That's the thing that I do. I make music, I write books. Maybe I'll make a game. I'll take. I've been people who've been watching the channel know like I was going to do that like 2 years ago. I had a bunch of other things come up. Right now, I'm trying to finish a couple of books and get that off, and then it's like, yeah, I think it's time. We should try making a game and see where that goes. Tried making something really cool, at least a visual novel or something on that level. I play a lot of games. I know what they I know what they're like. I know what they do. I know how they feel. I know how people get attached to them. I know that the games industry is bigger than the movie industry and the music industry put together. But conservatives don't want to interact with it. They would rather say that you're bad for enjoying a leisure activity that they don't understand or their bosses have told them is bad than to just embrace that thing and see what they can do with it. So those are the big reasons. Two big areas. They're passive, reactive, not proactive, and they are not willing to take financial risks for the sake of the culture. They're not willing to just have things exist because they're beautiful and good. They want to make a little ROI, and this has to do with a lot of the stakeholders in conservative media. So leave your thoughts down below, what you think, and I would be so happy to read them and know your opinions on this. You can join my Patreon, patreon.com/DavidBStewart. Same thing with the Ko-Fi, and you'll get a free book every month. I think this month's book, hopefully I put it up, it's Shadow and Smoke. So if you actually go now, you'll get the whole Moonsong trilogy. That's pretty cool for like 1 month of joining my Patreon if you are clever with it. I usually leave a couple of months of books up there so that people can get what they are wanting. There's even some tiers where I'll send you a physical copy of a book, right? And so, yeah, I'm working on that this year. There'll be more books. You get free copies of the books that are done with the live rights and all that kind of stuff. So check that out. And you be part of my patronage network and part of the patronage network of some of the authors that I know as well. So have a great one, and I will see you all next time. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Standard YouTube stuff, and take it easy.